Commissioner Roemer.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Reiss, Mr. Morris, I am always struck by people's reactions to the gaping hole at Ground Zero and how overwhelming that is. Whenever I'm in New York City, I am staggered by the loss of souls, the people, the fathers, the mothers, the sisters, and the brothers that were lost on that day. Nobody experienced that loss, probably more than the two of you did, with one of the greatest losses in American history of policemen from Port Authority, 37, and over 40 civilians that worked directly for both of you. I can't help but being struck by the words of Brian Clark to Stanley Pramath, who said, when he found him in the rubble, "Let's go home." This commission would like to go home at the appropriate point, but we've got a job to do, and that is, what are the lessons learned, what's been fixed, and what still needs to be fixed. It is in that light that I want to ask you some probing and I hope respectful and fair questions so that when this commission does go home and tries to work with Congress and the White House in a bipartisan way to fix these problems, you have best informed us as to what we can do better and how to get this job done at the end of the day. Let me start, Mr. Reiss, if I may, with you, sir. Let me ask you the questions of lesson learned. In 1993, you were 150 feet away from the bomb that exploded and went off, set by terrorists. New York City was struck twice in 93 and 2001. You implemented a $100 million plan to do certain things that accomplished a great deal. There were also some criticisms of what that plan did not accomplish. Let me mention two of them and have you fairly respond. One was drilling, that we didn't see the appropriate drilling by the people in the towers to actually participate in going down the stairwells and get out through the smoke doors or be familiar with the staggered stairs. And two, we have learned, and it is said, we've said in the staff statements, that there were problems with advice to some of the callers on 911 calls. Could you respond to both criticisms?
The World Trade Department staff conducted fire drills twice a year for all the occupants in the towers. It conducted them more frequently for places like Windows in the World and the daycare center and the observation deck staff, where there was a lot of transient public staff, and we did those basically monthly. Anytime a tenant moved in, a full floor tenant, as soon as that tenant moved in, we gave him a drill, typically within a week or two of moving in. We tried to stage the drills in the morning, say between 9 and 11. Enough time that people had come into work, but before people started leaving for lunch. But your criticism is well taken that these drills basically had the strobe lights go off and the evac tone, and people would come out into the hallways. Not everyone, because some people thought a fax was more important than participating in a drill. And we actually trained the floor wardens. Don't get into an argument with your coworkers, just tell us who didn't respond. And we'll try and deal with that through the office managers. But you're right, we did not have people walk down. We didn't have them walk down 50 flights of stairs. We did, subsequent to 1993, as you heard, paint a glow-in-the-dark stripe down the center of the stairs and all the way around these transfer corridors and put glow-in-the-dark signage in and the battery-backed-up lights. But no, we did not do that, and I've reflected on that, and that may be something that we need to do. People need to understand what they're going to encounter, and that there will be these various doors in a very high-rise building that try and block the chimney effect and smoke from a fire down below from contaminating the entire building. That's another whole lesson learned, that the building codes today don't really recognize a difference between a 20-story building and a 110-story building. And just the physics and the stack effect are quite different, and the codes need to recognize this, and they need to recognize that it's going to take a lot longer to get the people out of a 110-story building. I gave a speech to the building owners and managers that said I almost think that the stairwell should almost be like a tree trunk and grow wider as you head down rather than remain at this constant width, assuming that only a few floors evacuate at the same time.
Mr. Reiss, with respect to instructions, on our staff statement we say that the civilians were never instructed not to evacuate up. Do you think this has been fixed now, that we don't send confusing signs to people that there might be some type of hope at the top or a rooftop evacuation, that we tell them they have to go down?
I don't think it's been fixed. Again, we are a tenant in a private building on Park Avenue South, and we have fire drills. And that fire safety director goes through almost a canned speech that's basically laid out as a template from the Bureau of Fire Prevention, explaining to us that you only evacuate 2 floors down and then wait for further instructions. And then he goes, but I know you're the Port Authority staff, you're going to be out of the building if anything happens. We made no mention, and the fire safety director in my building continues to make no mention of whether the roof doors are accessible, if there's even a roof door. The New York City Building Code does not even require roof stairs for a roof that has over a 20-degree slope. The Trade Center roof was not flat. If you look at some of the pictures I've submitted to Commission staff, it actually sloped up in the middle to support the TV tower, and there was actually the capability to have a second TV tower on 2 World Trade Center. So no, I don't think it's changed, and I spoke to a good friend, Curtis Massey, who writes most of the fire safety plans. He's written them for the Time Warner Tower, the Aon Tower, the Sears Tower, the Hancock Tower. There's no instructions not to go up. There's no instruction that rooftop evacuation is not a feasible alternative if you can't get down. So that has to change.
We need to change that, and that must be fixed to save more lives in New York City and more lives in Chicago and across the country. I would strongly urge you to continue to speak out on that, and I hope this commission will make some recommendations on that line. With respect to 911 operators, too many times the advice given to callers above and below the fire line, sometimes a few floors below the fire line, were, quote, stay low, remain where you are, and wait for emergency personnel, unquote. Has this been fixed?
I have no personal knowledge if it has been. I have no contact with the 911 operators. That was basically the city's defend in place. You know, that the buildings are
Going
fireproof.
back to the previous set of questions, we need to fix that as well. Let me ask Mr. Morris, both of you, Mr. Reiss and Mr. Morris, this question about incident command. We have gone back to 1996, where Governor Pataki issued an executive order to try to get better communication and coordination between the police and fire departments. We even saw that Mayor Giuliani in July of 2001 issued a direction and control of emergencies in the city of New York. Still, the unified approach and incident commander policy fell by the wayside prior to 9/11. We understand that some new orders have been issued as of Friday, maybe to try to qualify for federal funds through Homeland Security Department recommendations. In your opinion, Mr. Morris and Mr. Reiss, do these new issued orders by the mayor, do they cut the mustard? Do they implement these changes that we need to see take place to save lives? Or do they institutionalize this system that has gone on too long in the past, with even the most qualified and preeminent people in the world in both police and fire department in New York City, that we don't see this unified command and incident command enough? Your opinion, Mr. Morris?
Well, the Port Authority Police, we're the third party involved with them, between the New York City Fire Department and the New York City Police Department.
Probably a good judge of this question, then.
In the past, there was rivalry. Since the 11th, and since I became chief, I know there was a, between the chiefs in both departments to to cross that span, to meet and to speak better and to have it go down to the ground level, that there has been a movement to do that. And it's starting to be formulated now by what came out on Friday.
But you're saying this is a good start, but you're not there.
It's a start.
Mr. Reiss?
I'd have to agree with Chief Morris. Last year, and I am now in the Port Authority's Aviation Department, we ran a drill at Kennedy Airport for a weapons of mass destruction type drill in a terminal with a gas attack. And the Port Authority police were there, along with the fire, Coast Guard, FBI, and I saw a marked difference in cooperation. In fact, the incident commander at that time was a lieutenant from the Port Authority police as we went through it, and people listened, people took orders. It was sort of a unified command. A lot depends on the leadership of the two organizations. If the two leaders show the leadership that they're going to work together and make this work, I think it's a great step forward.
Mr. Reiss and Mr. Morris?
This is the last question.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. What was the degree of cooperation with the Joint Terrorism Task Forces and the FBI to share intelligence with the both of you, given that 93 had been a terrorist attack, that we knew the landmark case in 93 and 94 terrorists were looking at New York City, that it remains one of the high targets for terrorists. We know terrorists are coming again. What was that degree of cooperation pre-9/11?
I can only speak, I was never at a level prior to 9/11 of the top security clearance that you need, but post. But I was also...
You were the chief of...
Yeah, September 26, 2001. But prior to that, I was a commanding officer of our detective bureau, and we were an active participant in the Joint Terrorist Task Forces, both in Newark, New Jersey, but more importantly in New York. John O'Neill came and spoke to us when he was FBI to command meetings, so he was there. He spoke. He knew individual commanders at the different facilities. My dealing with the FBI is they've always told us if there was anything that concerned any of our facilities. And again, we were a very active part. We had a detective that was all overseas and took part in the apprehension of Ramsey Youssef, so that we felt we were an active and equal member of that Joint Terrorist Task Force in getting information.
Thank you, sir.
Vice Chairman Hamilton.